it's gotten to the place where you can build something that's totally useful for you, having zero knowledge of coding at all. ChatGPT and Claude. Now they've been optimized to actually create code simply by using a prompt. So you can say, for example, I want to build a website, a landing page for my business, and it will just build it for you. It's actually quite amazing.
Welcome back to another Tourpreneur podcast, where we try to cut through the noise and bring real insights for the 21,000 tour operators that we now have in our community. Now, I've met many of you in person, as well as speaking to you all every week on courses and coaching that we do. And I'm pretty sure none of you joined this industry because you were in love with technology. You joined this industry because you were in love with creating experiences, travel, and introducing people to your experiences. However, unless you're living under a rock, we all know technology is absolutely crucial to what we do and how we run our businesses today, whether that's juggling emails, systems, booking systems, reviews, marketing, websites, all of that. It's technology, technology, technology everywhere we turn. Therefore, we have to get on top of it and have to have an understanding of it. What would you think if you could actually build the tools you need yourself, specific to your business, without being a programmer? Now, that sounds a bit crazy. It sounds a bit crazy to me. I'm thinking, I've done basic programming, but I'm useless at it. And I wouldn't even dream of building my own tools. I'm just the same as the rest of you. I went out and had a look at some SaaS systems and put the SaaS systems in my business. But today there's a topic in technology that's rapidly growing called vibe coding. It's a movement that's making app building accessible to anyone, whether you have a technology background or not. I think it's important, and hence I've introduced Drew Falkman, who's a strategist and a product builder who's been at the front line of this shift since it started about 2 years ago. In the past, he's worked for industry giants, tech industry giants like Hewlett-Packard and Adobe, and he also writes, produces, and hosts courses on LinkedIn. For any of you who don't actually know about LinkedIn courses, which is a lot of people I find, LinkedIn courses are a bit of a hidden gem. There are a lot of free courses on virtually every subject you could imagine, produced by great people on LinkedIn. Drew, welcome to the podcast, and let's get right into it. What is this? Why it matters? How to use it? And what's next for vibe coding? So explain to the tour operators listening, what exactly is vibe coding?
So look, what's happened over the years is AI, this new sort of generation of AI, which they call generative AI, is modeled against basically the entire internet. And because of that, it can do all kinds of crazy things. And you've seen this all with ChatGPT. You probably read about it, the images and the videos it generates, and that it can create content and all that kind of stuff for blogs. There are lots of great use cases. But if you think about places online where they keep code, so all these open source movements, things like GitHub, if you've ever heard of that, is a giant public repository of code. And these large language models, as they call them, like ChatGPT and Claude, they've trained on those as well. So they actually recognize what code is, and they've learned, and now they've been optimized to actually create code simply by using a prompt. So you can say, for example, I want to build a website, a landing page for my business. This is what my business is. You can upload information you have about it, your logo, all this, and share it with it, and it will just build it for you. It's actually quite amazing. Now, I'm going to put an asterisk there. It's still a work in progress, so it's not perfect yet, but some of the things you can do with it now are quite astounding. At this point, it's gotten to the place where you can build something that's totally useful for you, having zero knowledge of coding at all, or even design, quite frankly.
So if I'm a small one-person, two-person tour operator business and I've been going a few years, I'm used to using technology, but I've certainly never built technology. I use a booking system, or maybe I'm using a website, some social, and I'm maybe using a CRM. That's my limit. Why should I care about building my own systems?
Well, there's a few reasons. I think the whole software as a service industry right now is very nervous because the truth of the matter is, if you, let's say you're using a CRM system, and I do this, my wife has a clinic, so she's a physician, and so I help her manage her business. It's a small one person, one clinic kind of operation. And in order to get things done, we have to use the software as a service tools that are out there. None of them are quite designed for exactly how she's doing what she's doing. So we want to get contacts. We're marketing, we're trying to find people that need the treatments that she offers. And so we're using a CRM system, but we've used like 3 different CRM systems and we haven't liked any of them. They have tons of features that we don't even need, but it doesn't have the few things that we actually need. So imagine if I could just go in and say, I need a CRM system that's going to capture this data that's HIPAA compliant. I need a form where they can enter this stuff. And then I need to be able to have a pipeline on the back end so I can track these potential patients as we go through and sort of screen them and do all the things that we need to do for our specific process. And I'm sure it's the same for you. So you end up having these applications that you're paying all this money for. 80% of the features you're not using because they're designed for other industries, other people in other industries. And the things that you do use aren't quite refined enough, but they're probably not going to change them because there's not enough of you to make it worthwhile. But now you can actually build your own CRM tool in a day, and then you can launch it and test it, and you can iterate on it. So you can be refining your own application without having coders and all that stuff. I mean, it's a complete revolution in how we think about applications because you can build your own apps, which used to be something only enterprise companies could do.
So most of our listeners, small tour operators, probably running at revenues under 500k a year. What that means is their budgets are tight. They're always looking for ways to save money because
Yep.
margins are tight, and often a lot of tour operations, unless they're very lucky and operating in a niche with high-paying clients, if they're serving the general public, the margins are tight. So they're
Yeah.
always looking at ways of saving money, saving costs. So in a world of vibe coding or being able to build these little tools, how does that help people save costs? Is it just as simple as if I do this, I can do it without my CRM? Is there a cost to, obviously, there's a time cost of building and learning how to build these things, even though you're doing it by words, not by coding.
Mm-hmm.
So there's an opportunity cost from time. But is there a cost once you've launched a product? If you launch a simple CRM like you just suggested, to run a new business, is there a ongoing cost of running that product in the business?
Like any other software tool, there is going to be some sort of a cost. You can eliminate some of these software as a service tools, so you can save probably on some of those if you're able to do it. And let me just sort of caveat all of these with, you can't just dive in and build an app on day one. There are some basics you need to learn so that you don't build something that's going to break or is going to be a security risk and all that kind of stuff. And it's still, if you're building a very complicated sort of public facing app, you just have to be careful. It's getting there, but there are still some issues. So you want to be careful about that. So there's a little time, like you said. If it's public facing, then you're going to want to deploy it in such a way that people can see it. So you're going to have to plug in a domain and push it out and have a hosting fee. And there is a fee for most of the good vibe coding apps will have like a monthly fee. Like my personal favorite that I think is the most accessible is called Lovable, and it's available at lovable.dev, and we'll have information for that when this podcast goes live. They're like $20 a month for the pro version. And it comes with, you get a certain number of credits every day and a certain number of credits every month. And so every time you type in a prompt, it uses a credit. And that's kind of become standard in the AI world these days. So there's that expense. There's a little hosting expense if it's public facing. So if you're building your own website, for example, or if you're building like the CRM tool that I talked about, that's going to have to be hosted somewhere publicly. So you'll have to pay for that. If you're doing something that you're just using internally, then that comes with the cost of Lovable, because you don't need to have whatever.com. You can just, they'll create sort of like a site for you that you can use, and you just log in through Lovable and you can view it and you can do whatever you need to. One thing I would add is you can actually discover within your own processes areas that you might be able to improve, and you can build applications that nobody would build that you need for your specific workflow. So if there's something that you're spending a lot of time doing just for coordination and things, there might be a way to build an app to sort of create a workflow for that can help you to do these processes. So it's something you wouldn't have been able to buy a SaaS for because there isn't one, or if there was one, it would require so much customization to get it set up for you to do right. But now you can go in and say, hey, I need an app to help me with this workflow. What can you do? And it can actually help you figure that out as well in the long run.
As you would imagine, I've experimented with this. I've been building Vibe coding bits and bobs for X number of months, maybe a year now. I strongly recommend to readers, as Drew says, don't go public with what you build until you've got a bit of experience on this. I'm still building stuff that's non-public because I keep messing up. I can get 80, 90% correct very, very quickly. That last bit's a bit more challenging. But that 80, 90% still makes, as Drew was suggesting there, internal workflows is where I actually see the potential of this for our community. External customer facing, I think, is a more advanced level that maybe for the majority non-technical people, we shouldn't quite go there at the moment. But internally, in your business, automating things that are going to save you time, that's big wins. So,
Yep.
Drew, what's the sort of workflow, low-hanging fruit that simple things that tour operators could use that's not going to scare the living daylights out of them and encourage them to have a go at this?
Yeah. I mean, what I encourage entrepreneurs, and I advise a lot of entrepreneurs. So I do coaching for an AI product accelerator. So it's mainly people that they come from all industries and they want to create their own company. So and we sort of help them figure out what they can build with AI to do solutions. And so when we do it, one of the things that we always talk about in my industry, which is product management. And really what product management is, it's figuring out what problems we can solve through software products. And all the software companies employ people like me who their whole job is basically just to look at analytics, talk to users, and figure out what problems we are and understand technology and find ways to help. And so one of the things that we go through is sort of understanding a customer journey. So and that's one thing that I would want to know from tour operators is what is your sort of journey? Like where are you spending all your time? Are you spending a lot of it on sort of marketing and that sort of workflow and running campaigns and how are you marketing these different things? Are you spending it on interacting with customers that have signed up for tours and doing customer support? And every tour operator probably has different areas where they're spending more time. Some people, they've got the automation of marketing figured out. And so they've got that coming in and their spend is, managing customers and doing all this. Others, they're trying to get that marketing up and running and figuring out ways to do that. So it depends a lot on what you're doing. But in most places, there's somewhere that you can fill that gap. I mean, what Lovable does is it actually, so you can create whatever application you want, and then you can actually integrate AI into that app. So if you wanted to create like a very simple sort of chatbot that allowed you to talk to ChatGPT or allowed your users to essentially ask questions about your business, and whether this is pre-sale or post-sale, that will be up to you. But you can go into ChatGPT and you can train your own model, as they say. So you can create a little chat, and that chat can know everything about your business because you point it to your website, you upload information, any emails that you have that you've back and forth with customers to support them, you just put all that stuff in there and you say, hey, I want to create the ultimate support bot, and this is how I want you to talk to customers in this tone, and this is how I want to do this. And you can create that. And then you can plug that into your own application, which you can just embed on your website somewhere. And then you can have that for people to interact with. Or you can create it as a standalone app and say, hey, if anyone has questions, you can come here and do that. Things like that you can do that you maybe didn't even know you could do. And it sounds really complicated because you haven't done that yet, but it's actually pretty easy to do. You can go in and do it. My wife is a technophobe. Every time she touches her computer, she does something to it that I don't know how she does it. It's like magic, but something that will break it. And then I have to go in and spend hours trying to figure out what exactly she did. So, and she's like on ChatGPT, and she's like created her own chats like this, and she's off and running, and she can do this kind of stuff. So it's a lot more accessible than it seems, even though it's intimidating. So I want to just sort of get that message across. Like, don't let the newness of it intimidate you. My biggest recommendation is just play around with this stuff. There's nothing to lose. You can get Lovable for free. ChatGPT has a free version. You can just poke around and see what it can do and let your mind go and think about how it can solve problems for you.
So it's sort of putting my old tour operator hat back on. It sounds like a simple task, a 4-piece of paper, and writing down all of your processes and what's the most important to you in one rank, and then another list of what's the ones you really don't like doing. Because there's always a balance between what really needs doing and what operators like doing and don't like doing. And like you said, I would imagine if we put 10 tour operators in a room and got them to do that exercise, we would have very different lists, because some people have got
Absolutely.
marketing nailed in, some people haven't got marketing nailed in, some people get thousands of reviews every day and need a system to reply to the reviews in the correct way. Some people get a review every week, so it's not really a big issue for them. So it really is a case of looking at your processes, which is always a good thing to be doing anyway, ranking them from what needs doing and what could be improved, and also what your strengths and weaknesses are. So going on to strengths and weaknesses, and you mentioned at the end there, what's the learning curve? If it's a completely non-technical person who, a bit like you just described your wife, and non-technical apart from uses a phone and uses a computer and has subcontracted everything else to SaaS and websites, SaaS companies and website builders, marketing agencies, what's the learning curve on this? What are we talking about in time-wise, effort-wise, learning curve on this?
Yeah. So there's a couple different levels to it. On the one hand, so I teach a course. It's a 4-week course, and I designed it that way just because I've talked to a lot of people. And what I found is there's like a few key things they need to understand. One is, for a lot of people that haven't ever built apps or anything, it's really important to think about what you want to build before you build it. So let's say you've done your lists, like P said, which is a great idea, by the way. For any business, I always recommend entrepreneurs always be looking at, like, where are you spending your time? What are your frustrations? How can you eliminate those things that are not fun and that take a lot of time, and automate those things, because those are key? And then what are the important things that are missing that you want to make sure that you can spend the time to do? Because we all have things we're good at and things we're not. And so you want to do the best you can to take care of those things you're not good at. And so looking at that and thinking about how to plan an application. So I have a thing, and it's free. So I teach a course on maven.com, which is like it's just a ed tech website. And I have a free example, and I'll get it to Pete that you guys can use. And we call it the Vibe PRD. So in my world of product management, we create what's called a product requirements document. And it's one of those things that we spend hours and hours and hours doing. And it's just a summation of all of the conversations we've had with users and the data, and putting together like what's the vision of our product and what do we want to build and why do we want to build it and who's the target user. And we think about this and we give it to the team and they're supposed to read it all and then understand everything and then build the most amazing thing. Well, they never read it, and we end up having to just define everything in little small chunks, which that's my life. So it is what it is. But there's a way that you can use ChatGPT to speed this up. So I created a prompt and a process to create these, because the most important thing is planning out what you build first. So you have to, and I think that's a learning curve for a lot of people, because we're not used to thinking about what applications we want to build to help our life, just because that hasn't been something we've been able to think about. But now that you can, it's good to think about what you can do. And then once you've decided, I want to create an app that does X, Y, and Z, then you need to really hone in on what does that mean? And what do I want to build? And what's that going to look like? And so that's what that first process is, and the first learning curve is. And in my course, we do that in like a week. But I think, realistically, for a lot of people, it's going to take, 20, 30 hours to get a handle on that, right? It's going to take a few days of cranking away and thinking about it and understanding even what you're supposed to be thinking about, right? But once you've gotten there, that's the first step. Then the next step is thinking about what you want to build and how you want to build it, right? What are the screens going to be? And organizing that, because vibe coding is great because it's very accessible. And I don't know if you found this, Pete. If you don't define what you're building first and you go in and say, I want to build an app that does thus and such, it will build it. But anything you don't define, it's going to try and figure out on its own. And the more AI, today's AI at least, tries to figure out things on its own, the more likely it's going to get it wrong for you, or it's going to hallucinate and get it completely wrong. So what you want to do is be able to define and say, okay, so I'm building an app, and this app is going to help me. Let's say you want to build an app that allows people to submit bookings for things. So what's that going to look like? How is that going to manifest? Well, we need the ability to see what tours are available. Okay, so there's one screen, tours that they can book for. And then they can click a button and then it'll bring them to the next screen, which is going to let them choose dates, etc. And then that's going to bring them to another screen where they're going to enter their information and process the payment. And by the way, Lovable integrates with Stripe, so you can actually plug in payment systems into this. So you could build a full workflow that does exactly that. But you need to think through. So that's sort of the next step. That step is a little more intuitive. This one doesn't take as much time. Again, you're going to have to play around and experiment with it to get there. So it's going to be a few hours here and there to get there, but you'll get it. The third step is where it gets a little more complicated, and that is understanding sort of the data and back end piece of things. Because you're going to have to, if you want to store anything, so if you're having the user enter anything, then you're going to want to create a database. So if you're doing something to, let's say you're building your own CRM or this booking system. So you're building your own booking system. Well, you want to be able to capture all the user's information, and you want to capture which tour they signed up for, and you want to have this all in a nice database. Most people don't know what a database is. And it's kind of like a spreadsheet. If you've ever used a spreadsheet, most of us have, where you have sort of columns, and each column represents some sort of information, like a date or a name or whatever. And then you have rows, and each row is one record in that. And that's all a database is. Only a database will have multiple spreadsheets to track different information. So you have one data set that's like a spreadsheet that tracks all of the different tours you provide, right? And then you'll have another one that has all of the users, but then you have other ones that relate to that. So you have each user and which tour they've booked and what date. So you have kind of all these different sort of tables, they call them. So this is what I've seen people need to learn. So in the beginning, you learn how to plan for an app. Then you need to learn how to build the workflow and the user interface. And then you need to understand the data. And that one gets a little more complex. That can take again, a couple days of really getting in and diving in and understanding how that's all structured. And the beauty is some of these tools like Lovable, they help you with it. They sort of automate it and it has its own sort of database system built in. But you do need to understand what it's doing, because when it creates that stuff for you, you want to make sure it's doing it in the right way. So it's tracking the right data you want and not doing anything weird or incorrect.
For the operators listening to this, that's sounding a bit technical. I would just like to say I know you've all built something similar. You may think what you're talking about, Pete, I haven't built anything similar. You have, because you build tours. And if you just take an average 3-hour tour that doesn't exist, it's in your head at the moment, all of you have to go through a process that you've done multiple times, because most of you got multiple tours. You will plan this out in detail, stage by stage, step by step. And if you think of it in that way, that's what you're doing. The tour still needs the data. The tour still needs the certain points it carries out actions. So just think about when you're designing, and some of you have designed 14-day tours. That's a lot of designing and a lot of time every day planned out in detail. So when you're looking at this opportunity to design small pieces of technology that's going to help you run your business, just think you've already done a lot of this stuff when you've been designing tours. Let's talk about other tools, because you've mentioned Livable, but I know there's lots of tools that tour operators could be learning from. Just mention some other tools that give the tour operators a mix of tools they can be using for this.
Yep. So Lovable is my favorite because it plugs in a front end and a back end, and it has the integrations sort of to talk to ChatGPT or Stripe, which is nice, and it's actually really intuitive. There are other applications in that class. There's one called Replit, and that one's pretty well regarded. There's one called Bolt. Um, it supports mobile applications. So if you wanted to build a mobile app, you can do that in Bolt. The other ones are web applications. They'll work on mobile, but it's on a website, whereas Bolt can actually have an app that you can put in the App Store or in Google Play Store. And it's a little more design-ish. So you kind of, you say, I want to build this, and it can build something, and then you see everything, and then you can move things around. And sort of, if you ever played around with tools like that, a lot of the website designer tools, if you've ever built your own website, are kind of like that. There are more technical tools, but I think for doing this kind of thing, but I think for the most part, that's going to be out of scope for tour operators. There are other tools, though, that are adjacent to all of this that are helpful. One more vibe coding tool is called Magic Patterns. And I've been using this a lot lately, and I like it. It doesn't have the database backend, but it's great for building the whole front end part of it. And because it doesn't have the database backend, if you don't need any of that stuff, you don't have to bother. So it's really good for building websites. It can natively integrate like all your analytics tools and things, and it has a way of creating forms that will send you emails. So you can kind of really customize your own landing page, and that can be helpful too. And then there's other tools. One tool that I think is really interesting is called N8N. I think the website's n8n.io. It's a way of creating your own sort of workflows using AI. So you can like automate if something happens here. And this would be a way that you could manage reviews. So if you get a new review to Yelp, for example, it could then say, okay, it's going to respond, and then it's going to go and make a prompt to ChatGPT and get a good reply based on how you want to reply and the language and the things, and it'll generate it custom to that response, and then it'll go and post a response to that review. And you can say, like, you can be very clear on like, I want to make sure that if it's a negative review, that it responds in these certain ways, and if it's a positive review, it responds in these certain ways, and it can coordinate all that with ChatGPT and whatnot. So that tool can be really helpful in sort of building what we call AI agents. So you're like kind of vibe coding these sort of workflows that automate things for you on the back end. And then of course, I would be remiss to say like ChatGPT and Claude, are the best things for just interacting with. And, if you want to create your own sort of chats and get information and, use them to create content. I mean, that's the other thing you could do is you can create your own website and automate it so that it's actually generating sort of daily blog posts on different topics around the places where you give tours, or and based on your criteria and using the language that you want to use, and that can help with your search engine optimization and stuff like that too.
So for the operators listening to this, and I'm sure many of you have heard me say this before, the world we're in today, this AI world we're in, you as a small, tiny company, even a solo operator, have access to the same power of intelligence that $100 million companies have access to. You can access ChatGPT, Claude, any of the other ones, Gemini, some of the Chinese ones, exactly the same as a $100 million company. That's never happened in technology development before. Big companies always historically had access at a much higher level and better level than small businesses. This revolution, you have access to the same power as a $100 million company. The only restriction is you learning how to use it. So my strong advice is, if all of this is confusing you slightly and should have built apps and that, if you're not getting to that stage yet, please, please, please spend at least an hour of your time every day on ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini. I don't really care what it is, but at least an hour of your time, because it will change the way you think about things. It will expand your brain to see that you can do things in a different way. That is absolutely a productivity gain and absolutely a time saver. You're investing time to learn, but that learning time will not be wasted. It will be setting you up for the future, because the AI future is where we're going. We can't do anything about that. That's already baked in. So please, please, please spend time on these tools. So Drew, is this really for small operators, again, using these tools? Is this, I sort of see it as saving some time, saving some money is a given if they can get it right. But is there anything they could be building that's going to be a competitive advantage rather than just saving some money or saving some time? Is there, and I know this is probably the more advanced level where you actually are putting stuff out in front of customers, is there a way that tour operators could design and build competitive advantage with this?
Absolutely. This can give you an opportunity to actually create not just content that's compelling to the people that want to go on the tours that you're creating, but an application that can help them discover things without having to do that much, without having to do that much work. So if you're doing wine tours and things in a specific region, you could build like a little sort of interactive website that promoted that region, and you could interact with people in that region, and you could use ChatGPT to essentially allow you build content and allow people to ask questions and interact with that and discover more about that area. And so you're just getting people that are interested in that area. Oh, and incidentally, you can use that to plug in your booking engine, and now people can book directly from you, and you don't have to rely on these platforms. And that's a simple idea, but I think there's a lot of ways, and you guys know the people that you're marketing to way better than I do. Very simple things, and you can experiment with it. So you could say, I wonder what would happen if I put this thing out there where people could come and interact in this way, and just experiment and see what that does. And if that helps you to get customers, or if it helps you to get more people in your mailing list. There's all kinds of things you can do with it. It's really only limited to your imagination now.
Is there a point where there's everything you build and everything you put out, everything you use in your business and everything certainly you put in front of customers, is you've got to weigh up the opportunity versus the risks of doing it. There's obviously some dangers of non-coders building technology and sticking it out in the wind. Is there a point where you shouldn't do it yourself and maybe go hybrid, where you're hiring some technical help to make a kind of hybrid model rather than going all with the technical help or all yourself? Is there something in the middle there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So look, I think anyone who doesn't have experience with deploying software, the more complicated the application you have and the more visitors that are coming to it, the greater the likelihood that there could be something. So some sort of security issue or something that could happen. So I think the main consideration is really around what data are you storing for these users? Are you tracking important information? We refer to it in the business as PII, but it's basically just personal information. If you have someone's phone number, their address, that's sort of the lightest PII you can get. When you get into like social security number or credit card numbers, like these are things like I would highly recommend away from storing anything like that on your system. Um, the good thing about it is if you're not keeping too much information, you can do a lot. So you can track user information. You can use really easily with a tool like Lovable. You can, so if you want to create a website that someone logs into and they can come back to and they can interact with it and see it, you can plug in like Google authentication so that they're logging in with Google or with Microsoft or with Apple, sort of these third party. And that way you're not managing all their data. You can get their email and you can have their email and you can use that for your list and things like that. But that way you don't have to manage all that other information, which can be, it just makes you susceptible to being hacked or something like that. So that's the main thing is like, what information do you have and what would be the cost if someone were to get a hold of that? So the more you can minimize that and like using Stripe for your payment so that they're handling the credit cards and all that stuff so that none of that's on your side, that can all help it. So that's the main caution is what data you're using. Or the other piece would be like, if your site goes down, what's in there that would cause frustration to the user? Those are the two main things, but the data is the primary. Like think least data you can track of the user, but still have value for your business. That's where you want to focus. If you have anything sort of out public facing.
Okay, great. So for the last bit of this podcast, I want to sort of focus on the future. We've all got to place bets on the future. We can't change yesterday. We can only change today and tomorrow. But future gazing is difficult. We all know that. But if you get it even sort of right, you end up with a competitive advantage. So where do you see vibe codings? And the days of trying to look 5 years ahead are completely and utterly gone. That was from when I was younger. We can only really look 2, maximum 3 years ahead in today's world with the speed of technology change and society change. So where do you see vibe coding existing in, say, 2 years or 3 years?
I think it's going to change things a lot, quite frankly. Right now, for most large companies, they're very cautious about using these tools because they have a lot to lose. Plugging in these things, it can save them development time. It can definitely save them cost in engineering. But if they are compromised and they do lose data, that's a big PR loss for them and a loss of trust. And so I think there's a lot of caution out there. But I think because of that, there's a lot of energy going into making better code generation, making better workflows to integrate with engineers. I know I've had people reach out to me. There are some like engineering shops that are pivoting towards basically just helping people who are vibe coding. So if you're vibe coding an app and it's getting some data, you can hire them and they'll do a quick audit. They'll basically look through it and see if there's any security issues and fix them up, and then you're good to go. And I think that's going to be kind of the wave of the future. And for me and for my money, I would not invest in starting a SaaS company right now. I think that a lot of these SaaS apps are going to be completely blown out of the water when people can just build their own apps to do what they want to do. CRM is a great example. There are so many CRM tools, and these CRM tools have so many different features within them. But the truth of the matter is every company only needs a subset of them. So they're building this huge code base, and each of their companies is only using a fraction of it. And eventually when they can create their own, and all you're really doing is managing your contacts, people are just going to build their own. Why not? Just build what you need. And I think what'll happen is there will be more sort of, for lack of a better word, like base apps that you can start with. So you can go to these vibe coding tools and say, all right, I want to build a CRM. And it knows what that means, and it'll instantly create a subset of things that you have that's already been developed and tested and ready to go. And now you can add the features that you want around the outside. And I see that becoming more of a thing in the future where you can essentially plug and play some of these things and interact, and then use the vibe coding aspect, which is really just typing in prompts to sort of add in the functionality that you need for your company. The other thing I would say is I think how people discover things is going to be very different because of, and this isn't about vibe coding per se. This is just about AI. Like more and more people are using these tools to find things. And I don't know if you found this, but the Google traffic is definitely changing a lot. It's dropping because people are looking at AI overview and they're reading that and they're getting information from there and maybe not clicking on the link that you wanted them to click on. And so it's not that they won't find you, it's just that there will be a different way of finding things through this AI. And in some ways, it's going to be great. And in other ways, it's going to be more difficult to stand out. So staying on top of that and making sure that you're still findable and discoverable is going to be sort of the next challenge because the traditional search engine optimization and thing and even search engine ads, I think is going to change a lot in the future.
So I've written quite a bit about the threat to SaaS from this in the past over the last 18 months. For the listeners to understand where this threat, or in my opinion, where this threat's coming to, it's not coming direct to small operators, SaaS companies who are providing you at the moment, selling you SaaS at $50 or $100. Maybe your SaaS bill's $300. If you go to the S&P 500, the average SaaS bill per month will be over $1 million. Some of them are spending $5 million a month on SaaS, some of them higher. So there's a global pressure on the top companies to reduce the costs if they can, if this technology proves they can dramatically reduce those numbers. That will happen. And I already know it's happening because I know some of the factories that are building for the S&P 500. Why does that matter to us small, tiny businesses and tour operators? Because normally what happens at that level then cascades right down through the industry. We never lead because of the size of the businesses. But if that's happening at that level and it embeds at that level, it will impact all the way through our industry and all the way down to the SaaS products that we use today as well. Maybe not overnight, but it's already happening. I'm seeing that happening at the moment. Where you mentioned earlier on, you could see use cases. The biggest challenges, small operators have many challenges, but often the biggest challenge is more sales, just getting more sales to get them to a point where they've got a lot of cash flow going through that allows them to actually sit down, strategize, and run the business in a professional manner. Up until that point, it's often just a mad, chaotic drive, sales, deliver, get more sales.
Yep.
A lot of their sales are coming from OTAs, a lot of their sales are coming from other partners, their sales are coming from all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
But where they really struggle, many of our members, is direct sales. We have some geniuses at it, but the vast majority of our members don't do direct sales well. They have to rely on so many different partners. Where do you see this particular challenge of being able to help them get more sales, more eyeballs on the product?
Yeah. I mean, there's two pieces to that. Though on the one hand, it's being able to create sort of the inflow of leads, lead generation, whether it's getting exposure for your company or getting actual, people to click and submit the links. And then the other piece of that is getting decent leads and having that sort of conversion funnel as we call it, where you click. And I think there's two ways you can do on the front end, on the marketing piece. By building these sort of value apps, you can drive direct traffic to you. So if you can create these sort of interactive web applications that can entice people who would take the kind of tours you would take and be able to market them directly to your audience and hopefully get them to book from that so that they're not coming in from all these third-party sources. So you can create your own sort of traffic generation and even market that and get people to come to that instead of coming directly, and building relationship through that app with your customers. And then the other piece is getting that sort of your own funnel set up so that when people come and register for your tours, you're able to sort of capture and optimize that. And part of the problem with a lot of these platforms is, you don't have control over that. If people want to sign up for your tour, they go through the Airbnb process or they go through the Expedia process, and you don't have control over that. Whereas if you create your own sort of booking engine, you can pull them through that and you can optimize that. And one of the cool things is when you get into sort of building your own tools is you can look at analytics. I use this application called Full Story, and I can filter all of the people that come to my website based on, let's say you've created a booking engine and you have, I want to book, and then you have 3 different steps, like I talked about earlier, where you select your tour and you enter your information. And I can filter based on how far people get into that system. And I can actually watch them and I can see recordings of what they clicked on and what they did. And I can find out people keep dropping right here. Why are they dropping here? What is it that's doing that? And then you can experiment with what you could do to increase that. And so if you're getting 1,000 users to your booking engine, but only 10 of them are completing it, you can look at every step of the way and figure out how you can optimize that to get people enticed more. And part of that is just once they've clicked on this, then showing them some of the great things so that they want to do the next step. And you have control over this now. And so you can experiment with it and you can highlight it with the value that you only know that Expedia and Airbnb would never be able to do. Right? So you have a lot more control over it. And that's really the power of this, is putting the control back into your hands again, instead of just having to rely on SaaS companies and platforms to do all the work for you.
So as we wrap this up, Drew, give us, just to finish off, just one thing you would like our listeners, our community, small tour operators to go away. If this has been inspiring, if they've listen to this and think, I could do something, what's the one thing they should go away and just start with?
It depends what level you're at, but my advice is always, like, this is great to talk about in the abstract, and in the abstract it might make a lot of sense, but you're not really going to totally understand what exactly it is you can do until you try it. So for my money, I would say go to lovable.dev and run a prompt and just build something and just see what comes out. These things, they'll time out, they won't last forever. So you have nothing to lose. No one else will see it, but play around with it, see what you can do. And I think once you've seen the possibility, when you see that you can type something and it builds you a web page, a form, interactive things, I think you'll see the power and you'll understand what you can do with this tool.
Okay, Drew, thanks so much for joining us and opening our eyes to what vibe coding. I don't know who comes up with these trends and words, vibe coding, San Francisco, I take it. But we needed to know what it means for small tour operators, and hopefully we do now. For our listeners, remember this, you don't need to be a tech wizard to this. For example, we have multiple operators in the community who've already reached out to me and showed me tools that they have built. Some of them are now scaling those tools, not just for their own company, but for other tour operators. So this is already happening in the community, and it's sometimes happening at scale. So even if you're just been inspired enough to have a go, 100% what Drew said, this is not a talking thing, this is a doing thing. For people to learn this, you need to do it. So at Tourpreneur, our mission, as always, is to help 21,000 operators, growing at a couple of hundred a week, to navigate changes in the industry just like this. If today's conversation sparked ideas, jump into the community, ask questions in the community. Yes, of course you can ping me and Drew on LinkedIn as you do, but the community is where you share your thoughts, and then lots of other operators contribute as well. And having 10 brains or 20 brains or 100 brains commenting and helping is much better than just mine. So once again, thanks very much, Drew, and thanks to everyone that was listening.
Thanks for having me, Pete.